first of all, thank you, Asia Society, and to the young leaders. My two words for for our last panel, I would have said hope and courage, because I think that's what we need today. You can't let go of hope, but where does hope come from? And you really do need courage, because you have to look at the world today and embrace crisis. This is the world you are inheriting, and I'm so sorry for the young leaders that are coming up, because we're handing you a relatively broken world. And now we need your help to fix it. Let me go through, right? Several things are happening. So the first is almost everything I say, the beginning of it, the data that backs it, are all in this book, which was published in 2022, November of 2022. And I first wrote it for Filipinos, right? Because I thought, I wasn't sure what was going to happen to us. And the question I came out with is, what will you sacrifice for the truth? Because that was what kept coming up over and over and over again. And then the irony, of course, is that we were among the first. I won't say the first, because I think Ukraine may have been first. But then it's moved forward, right? So this book has now been translated to maybe 25 different languages. This one, the French are far more aggressive than how to stand up to a dictator, right? They said, resist the dictator. The Japanese is so interesting because there's no dictator in the title at all, right? It's actually about social media in the Japanese character, so that's fascinating to me. Korean was fascinating as well, especially given what happened in Korea last year. Of course, Mandarin, right? Taiwan. Look, actually, all of the countries that are right on the precipice are in our part of the world. So Taiwan, Mandarin. This is one of my favorites, even though it was just launched April last year. Do you know what language this is in? Yes. Who said Georgian? Georgian. And that, you have to give it to Georgia, because Georgia has had more than 365 days of protests every day, right? They essentially, a Kremlin-backed group took power, and yet the citizens, the opposition, the journalists, there are a lot of opposition politicians now in jail, and yet they keep coming out every day. And the woman journalist, the first one who was jailed, she was behind a glass wall. Her name is Amaglobeli, throat. Mzia Amaglobeli. She now has the same legal counsel as I do. Keelan Gallagher picked up her case, but behind the glass wall where she couldn't speak, she just held up the book, right? It made me go, oh my gosh, we have a lot of work to do. This is Mongolia, between China and Russia, right? So this is our world today. And so this just came out 3 years after. So you'll see that I will show you a report that we're coming out with in America, about America, that is very reminiscent of what happened in the Philippines. But this is 3 years after it made it to number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list, right? How Americans, others in democracies around the world, are now faced with the same challenge we dealt with in 2016, right? And I always did say this, what we were going through in 2016 was coming for you. I said that in 2016 in Silicon Valley, and it did. And now let's see. I actually used to think, we Filipinos, I thought we were too nice, we were ducking too quickly. But now I gotta say, those Americans, they gotta get off, right? So I think this is one of those moments when the global north can look to the global south. And that's why Asia's young leaders become very important. Let me go through some of the things that are fascinating now to me. This is the newsroom of Rappler in 2016. And what was fascinating here for me was that we were just getting ready for what we thought was going to be an incredibly wonderful elections, because social media is there. Someone actually asked me, do you think censorship can happen again? Can a dictator take office again? And I was like, no, social media is there. Boy, I didn't know what social media can do, and let me take you through that, because we learned it firsthand. Artificial intelligence is neither artificial nor intelligent. And it is actually technology that has been around for more than 70 years, right? The first time that it really hit mass scale, right, was with social media. And that's when, if you are on Facebook, for example, everything you have done, machine learning has come in and made a model of you that knows you better than you know yourself. Replace that word model with clone, right? You've been cloned. Did you say yes to that? No, none of us did. But we'll talk about this more, so that all of our clones are now picked up by artificial intelligence, pulled together. That becomes the master database for micro-targeting. Micro-targeting is not the same as media advertising. In fact, think about it like this. This is the concept of tech, that they can personalize everything for you. And maybe when it was advertising and marketing, when we were looking for sneakers and the sneakers followed you for 2 weeks, that's okay. But when you are talking about a vision of the world, a reality you live in, if every one of us in this room had a personalized reality, we would have called this room an insane asylum in the old days, right? That's what personalization has done. So the first wave of AI came through social media. We haven't dealt with the problems there, but the second one is out. Generative AI, large language models, the concept that you can throw everything in, feed. There are actually 2 major ideas of generative AI, but the one that has gotten the incredible I'm going to say tens of billions, but I think now it's in the trillions now that we're talking about, because the valuation of the companies are hitting the trillions. This is where the investment has come in. And for those of you in the stock market, right, the top 5 companies, we have to look at the data, because the data shows us that things like generating code from AI, right, that yes, take-up went up, but now take-up is going down. We can talk about that more. Let me show you the way I felt this, and this became very personal at some point. Come. This is the first wave, right? This was 2016, and this is a network map of the social media networks that were attacking journalists, women journalists, and politicians. And you can see it was so organized that they broke down a message by demographics. This account took care of the thinking class, weirdly enough, like that. You guys would have been addressed by this. So say the message of the day is, the sky is orange. This one would write it for our demographic. This account took care of the middle class in the Philippines, and this account, a former, I would say she's our more salacious Katy Perry, as an entertainer, as a singer. She was a singer who campaigned for former President Duterte. This account took care of the mass base. So again, we could map it, right? And what was fascinating about this time period is that it came at you. The tech companies would say this is free speech. What we began to realize was this is a flood of speech that could silence the voices you don't want, right? And that's after having received 90 hate messages per hour. These are some of the things that we got. Okay, don't drink or eat in the next 3 or 4 slides, right? So I'm not corrupt. They couldn't attack me for being corrupt. I've been a journalist. By February next year, I'll have been a journalist for 40 years. I've spent most of my life in front of the camera telling our stories in my part of the world. So they attacked the way I sounded, the way I looked, my sex. They attacked my skin. I have dry skin. Did you know that can be weaponized against you? So every kind of photo, every time Rappler did an investigative story or we won an award, I would get photos that were doctored that would go around. And then the dehumanization began, and they had a nickname for me, right? It took me a few years before I could actually publicly show you this, but I thought, why? It's already public. It was out there. They called me scrotum face, right? Because I have dry skin. And when you're the target of 90 hate messages per hour, it's meant to shut you down. It is meant to silence you. And this is when I began to realize this is free speech used to silence free speech, right? So, and again, I'm not alone in many of this. This wasn't taken down. In fact, one of the first times it was sent to me was my mom. What do you say? You know, your mom sends this to you. You go, Mom, please get off social media. Anyway, so it took a few years before it finally all came off. But when I went to Facebook, they said, Maria, you're a public figure. Just report it to us. 90 hate messages per hour. There aren't enough hours in 24 hours to report 90 hate messages per hour. They did change a lot of these policies later on, and we can talk about that. But later, it became worse. So they would take it down, but then this is a Facebook page, Vove PH. And you can see again, my skin is better than that, right? So but they make it look really bad, and then they're super creative. Still there. Right? And by that point, I was in my 50s, so I had enough grounding, right? I'd lived through enough stuff. But I worried about our kids. The median age in the Philippines is 23 years old, and we had reporters who were on the front line who were getting attacked as much as I was. Pia Renada felt that, right? Anyway, I wasn't alone. So in 2022, Julie Passetti, who now works with us in the NERV, released this. Here's some of the stats from 2022. 73% of women journalists experienced online abuse, right? When Miriam Santiago said, you know, I eat death threats for breakfast, I felt like I had the accelerated death threats for breakfast. But women journalists, 25% of those received threats of physical violence, and of those, 20% had been attacked in the physical world. So when we were getting this in 2016, I increased our security in Rappler 6 times, right? This is a little, we're a total of 120 people. Our annual revenues up until then were anywhere between $3 to $5 million a year, right? Anyway, we kept going. So here's my generative AI experience. Almost every month now. By the way, if you've seen something where I'm selling crypto, do not buy. Where I'm telling you you have diabetes and throw away your insulin, do not believe. These are just some of the deep fakes that are out. But this I pull out because we literally were able to trace it to a Russian scam network. And I'm going to show it to you. So can you pull up the mic on this one? This is what it looked like. This is the early one, right? So this is just a deep fake audio. Go ahead. Oh, let's see if, let's play this.
Today I want to share one of my
secrets.
What helped me to become a successful person is to quickly jump into new opportunities without any hesitation. And right now, my #1 source of income is a new automated cryptocurrency trading program. This is the biggest opportunity I've seen in my entire life to make a big fortune quickly. You can invest 14,500
Sorry, we didn't have audio.
For 120,000 monthly without much labor. I urge everyone to check this out before the banks shut down this platform.
#1, I'm Pinoy, so I say pesos, not pesos, right? That was the first. But again, people believed it. I had a CEO of a company call me and ask where they could invest in the crypto. I was like, not me, it's not me. So the problem is, this is what you're dealing with, and it's getting worse, right? You cannot tell the difference between fact and fiction. The 3 sentences I've said over and over since 2016. Lies, sorry, let me first set that up. By design, social media spreads lies at least 6 times faster than facts. That's a 2018 MIT study, right? It's gotten worse since Elon Musk brought it and turned it to X. So what does that mean? That means without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we can't have a shared reality. You can't have journalism. You can't begin to solve existential problems like climate change or what about another pandemic. You cannot have democracy. And I'm going to give you a prediction which kind of, I hope, will light a fire for us. I won't depress you. I promise by the end of our time together, you won't be depressed. But you need to really see the problem. I think we have 6 to 8 months for news organizations to survive. And we can talk about that more later, why. But I think we have about a year for democracy to survive. Because every time that we are manipulated by the tech that all of us carry in our pockets, every time you're manipulated at a personal level, we're manipulated as a group, and then emergent human behavior. And what do I mean by that? Like, you cannot have electoral integrity if I can insidiously manipulate you, right? And yet it took from 2016 to 2024 before a country voided an election, and that was Romania, right? And they did the right thing, but look at all of the other elections, starting with the 2016 US elections. So electoral integrity, 72% of the world today is now under authoritarian rule. We are literally electing illiberal leaders democratically. That stat is from VDEM. So here you go. It was a marketing term. Please don't fall for the hype. Ask for the data, right? Many of our companies have started picking it up. Have you noticed every company has put in generative AI? And yet, the best error rate is 16%. And it can be wrong up to 79% of the time. So be careful, 16% to 79%. Why? Because of impunity. They've taken every data, I would say, stolen the data from news organizations, fed it to the machine, but it is not their data, so they cannot anchor it in facts. And I'll show you how in Rappler, we were able to build a chatbot with a less than 2% error rate because we own our data. Sorry, you'll get some anger from me. Anyway, this is the business model. It's toxic, it's a surveillance model, and here are some of the harms that we're living through, right? Surveillance and digital colonialism here. This is Chris Wiley, the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower. He said, colonialism didn't die, it only moved online. Why? Because in the past, when one editor makes an editorial decision, you can hold that editor accountable. But now, when the algorithm does it, guess what? It's replicated millions and billions of times, and it is invisible, right? We just live with the impact. The second, biased and oppressive AI systems. Again, you'll see at the end how we will fix this, because we can, but in this one, we in the Philippines, the 2 countries that were first doing content moderation for Facebook were, not surprisingly, the Philippines and Poland. Warsaw and Manila was where content moderators were in 2016. And the exploitation of data workers, of course, right? Because that person in Manila, in a call center that's going through YouTube, the beheadings on YouTube, that person has to deal with the trauma. So we clean up for the global north, much of it coming from the global south. Not much of this has really been stated, but you will have seen some of the stories on the New York Times recently, the environmental damage from resource-intensive AI operations. This is really difficult because Sam Altman in OpenAI actually said that one company needs the energy, one company, of 250 nuclear power plants. This is what we are doing, right? That's the race of the kind of VC funding that is going to generative AI. And let's end with this last one. Boy, I'm going to really depress you for a few slides. Only a few. If we're insidiously manipulated, if you have a devil and an angel on your shoulder, and every person, and this has been our battle through our lives and through our societies, you try to do the right thing, right? You know that cartoon, there's the angel telling you, do the right thing, be fair. And then the devil telling you, oh, take advantage, you can get more money, and that's our battle as individual leaders. But then what the tech has done is it's kicked off the angel. It's kicked the angel off your shoulder, and it grew the devil so it goes directly into your nervous system. We are encouraging the worst of humanity. Now that I've depressed you, let's keep going, right? It is really important that we know exactly what this tech is doing. So here's the thing where we turn crisis into opportunity. This is a company that we kept out of the limelight through the Duterte years. It's our sister company. It's called The Nerve, precisely because if we had been shut down, we would have been up again within 24 hours. You never say never. That's one, right? And so what we did is our tech and data company, this became that. And what we learned from the Philippines, the best part of getting 90 hate messages per hour, you don't have to ask the tech companies for the data. It comes directly to you, right? So it's blessing and a curse, but really, medium and long term, it was a blessing. Because also the other part, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? This is why we set up The Nerve. And our first was us in the Philippines. And I'll show you some of that. But then we went on to different countries around the world. 30% of Rappler's revenues now come from this company that was born in crisis. And we needed to do that because when did we get our first shutdown order? We got a few, and we're still here. But the first shutdown order was January 2018. By April, so within 4 months, we dropped 49% of our advertising revenues. 49%, right? And so what did we do? We used it. We challenged ourselves to come up with what is it that we can do that can actually bring in revenues, that can help society. That's why we formed Nerve. And let me show you some of the things. So now let's talk about exactly what information operations are, right? Because most people think you see something on social media, it's gone. You see something like, and shitification of the internet, that's a Cory Doctorow phrase. Now it's called AI slop, right? The pink slop of AI. But this is the way it works, right? So let's talk about the two phases of how information operations and information warfare works. The first is you seed a meta-narrative. That seed of the meta-narrative can be something completely like ridiculous. In this case, let's talk about Ukraine. The first seeding of the meta-narrative that Russia used to annex Crimea was in 2014. They annexed Crimea then, and then opportunistically amplified it until that very same lie in 2014 became fact and was used by Putin to invade Ukraine in 2022, 8 years later, right? Because when you see the meta-narrative, even though it is a lie, when you repeat a lie 1 million times, it becomes a fact, right? Here, I'm going to show you something that, and again, I put it in the West because the West sometimes thinks that all of these things happen out there where we are, but you know, I'm going to show you how it worked in the UK riots. So again, look at the same thing. And if you're Pinoy, you know we've lived through this. Pinoy means Filipino for those who aren't here. Narrative building, the malign actors craft disinformation narratives. They seed it on social media so that and what happens on social media, the polarization is built in by design. Then opportunistically exploit every crisis and grow the network. There's a global network of malign actors working together. And finally, it makes the lie a fact. It's normalized. And it just keeps going because this is the design of the public information ecosystem today. Let me bring you to the UK, the Southport riot. And this is interesting because it was very clear. There was a mass stabbing, and almost immediately the lies came in, right? We're going through this, for example, with the South China Sea, what we Filipinos call the West Philippine Sea, Chinese disinformation. But this one is very easy to see because it's one isolated instance, but you can see how disinformation is like fertilizer on the ground, right? This is what happened in the UK. And you can see when was the narrative built. This is, you can see here, this is when it was seeded, and these are opportunistic amplification. The narrative building that happened was based on, by the way, the two fracture lines in every society around the world is identical. It is gender and race. And anti-immigration narratives are closely tied to race in many of these. For the UK, you can see here the echo chamber reinforcement, crisis exploitation, and then the way it was amplified. I show you this because the Filipinos here have seen us do many of these stories in Rappler. We did this in 2016. Part of the reason we were attacked was we started a 3-part propaganda series then. So let's bring it to the rest of the world. Like, how about America? Remember Stop the Steal, right? This is from the Electoral Integrity Partnership. Stop the Steal, talking about how elections were fraudulently rigged. It was first seeded a year earlier in August 2019 on RT, Russia Today, right? Used to be Russia Today. And then a year later, Steve Bannon carried it out, mainstreamed it, and Tucker Carlson pulled it out September 2020, and then QAnon normalized it and dropped it. There was a period of time when QAnon was taken off social media. This is no longer the case, right? Especially after, oh yeah, then it got worse. Does this sound familiar to Filipinos, right? What I lived through here was weaponization of social media coming up. And the first one was journalist equals criminal. I'm not a criminal. And yet, I had 11 arrest warrants in a little over a year in 2019, right? Of those 11 criminal charges, after President Duterte left office, we began to win the cases, and I have one left. But until today, it's been almost a decade since 2016. Until today, I have to ask for permission to travel from the Supreme Court, right? Until today. And I could still go to jail any day for up to 7 years. So, that's where I just let my lawyer deal with it, and I just keep going. So this happened in America, and I'm going to bring you to America. This is the report I told you we're coming out with, and if it's okay, I would love you to see it again. For Filipinos, it's very familiar. The first 100 days of Trump 2.0, narrative warfare and the breakdown of reality. It's very familiar because it is exactly what we went through in the Philippines. So what was fascinating is that what you saw in the first 100 days of President Trump is 143 executive orders in 100 days. And the executive orders, actually, they were things like the Gulf of Mexico became the Gulf of America, right? Some of them are crazy, but some of them dismantled USAID. Some of them got rid of DEI, and the worst name ever for anything. But this is the strategic objective, dismantle democratic checks and balances. I would say in the Philippines, it took then President Duterte 6 months to dismantle our checks and balances. And the Philippines has a constitution that's patterned after the United States. It was faster in the United States. So 143 EOs, this is what happened with social media and the self-perpetuating feedback loop. I became a journalist because I know information is power. And this is the way it worked in America, right? The trigger was the 143 EOs. It worked in the real world. Then it was amplified by a decentralized network of influencers, and more conservative right wing reframes the events for politically aligned communities. They separate it, left wing, right wing. We don't quite have this in the Philippines. It's a whole different thing for us. We separated in the Philippines based on economic class, actually. Reinforce, then the platform algorithms rewarded emotionally charged content, and it just kept going. 143 executive orders. And then what happened? Well, I'll give you one finding of the 4 that we will publish next week. The key finding number 1 is that governance in those first 100 days was subordinated to narrative warfare. Again, if civil society, if the people in a democracy, the citizens in a democracy do not have facts and are insidiously manipulated, if you have created chaos, it is impossible to have a democracy. The primary output was narrative. Were not primarily policy instruments, but they were content triggers. And we broke them down, both the way NERV works as we look at the messaging, the way the messages cluster together, and then we look at the networks that distributed the messages. Policy as prop. So yes, it's an EO, but yes, what did it do? It actually started breaking down the checks and balances that were in the American Constitution. Identity conflicts, fear, anger, hate, politics as a gladiator's battle to the death. This is what we were seeing happening in America. We looked at the digital system that's rigged for asymmetric polarization and the impact on American society. Again, those of you who know our work of Rappler in the Philippines, this is identical to what we lived through, right? And the only time where they actually merged together was the day I was arrested. And it was funny, it came together, but then when I looked at the map, I was like, I don't want to keep getting arrested to bring this together, right? But look, so we can take this apart this way, but what we see is those who are the mainstream media, who try to stand, who don't necessarily, because what fuels this? Fear, anger, hate, lies. So who are the ones who win? The authoritarians who use fear, anger, hate, and lies, right? Well, these guys have absolutely no idea how to work in this tainted public information ecosystem. And by the way, the reason NERV worked was there were many companies in our country that were also targeted. How do you know what is coming at you, right? So that was part of what we saw, is that the guys doing the info ops, the information warfare, they're cohesive. And because of the algorithms, they're insulated, right? This is the manipulation of our public information ecosystem. So this is a crisis of trust and institutions. And we're seeing this happening all around the world. But this is also where the challenge comes for those leaders in the global South, right? Who do we see standing up? Ooh, we now have a group called Democracia Siempre, led by Latin American countries, by Brazil, which has said no. And one of the things that we can see now is, what will leaders in Asia do today, right? When the entire geopolitical power shift is happening, because 2 trends are happening simultaneously. What you're seeing now of tech, the kind of big tech power, and simultaneously the way the tech companies are now being used, I'm going to use the phrase securitized, the word securitized. They're now being seen as weapons for security. Anyway, let's keep going, because I'm not going to leave you with all the bad stuff. This is the last slide on this report, but you can see, again, very familiar to Filipinos, right? How did it work? The end game is kleptocracy. We have protest rallies today on corruption. That's the end game here, strategic corruption and kleptocracy. But this is what we've seen: narrative warfare and the breakdown of reality, the dismantling of institutional checks and balances, and finally, strategic corruption and kleptocracy. The world is at this critical moment when I stood in front of the UN, and I don't know why they asked me to help open the UN, but there were 4 women who opened the UN General Assembly for the 80th year, right? What I just pointed out was that information integrity is the mother of all battles, because if you cannot tell fact from fiction, we lose every battle. That goes to climate change, to pandemics, right? So I kept calling it an information Armageddon, right? Because really this is it. This is an information Armageddon. And I use Armageddon because I'm an optimist. Because the other word I was looking at is information apocalypse. You don't want an apocalypse because that means the battle is over and we've lost. Armageddon means we jump in now. And so what do we have to do? These are some of the things we have to do. There were 300 Nobel laureates. We rolled this out in November of 2022. Just 3 basic points. And our main goal here was to the EU, because at least they were doing something, right? They have the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act. The first, stop surveillance for profit. Because we now live in a world where everything physical is getting mirrored in the virtual world. Why are our laws not mirrored in the virtual world, right? Why will a company that just wants to make more money encourage the worst of who we are as people, right? That's the first. Stop surveillance for profit. Number 2, stop coded bias. Because if you are a woman or LGBTQ+, if you are brown or black, if you come from our parts of the world, you are further marginalized online. And then finally, this last one, journalism as an antidote to tyranny. Because when you lose us, I'm going to say when you lose journalism, you lose the capacity to hold power to account. At least that's what the Norwegian Nobel Committee said, right? But here's the challenge to you. Your courage, you, the young leaders here in Asia, your courage will determine whether we win, right? And that's the same of any business leader today. Let me go through the 3 ways that we actually can rebuild trust. And this is what we've done in Rappler. The best part of being under attack is you can't stand still. So we keep going. And I actually really think that now the Global South can teach the Global North something. We have 3 pillars in Rappler: technology, journalism, and community. On the journalism part, that's the part I'll take apart first. In 2019, we began to form the International Fund for Public Interest Media. But it was really in 2022 when we went for ODA funds. We have a former head of the World Bank here, right? We went for overseas development assistance funds and told countries, democratic countries who abdicated responsibility for protecting citizens online, we said you have spent less than 0.02% on media. You should spend more. So they gave us roughly $60 million, and we have given that to 112 independent media organizations. I co-chair this fund along with Mark Thompson, who heads CNN, independent still. Let's talk about American media later on. But here's some of the cool things in the grants that we've given, and we've given in the Philippines as well, right? 93% reported positive major impact. We kept the women growing. 57% of editorial teams are women, and they are young. 56% are youth, age 18 to 35. Plus, 53% increased their earned revenue. That's on the journalism part, because as advertising revenues collapse, we need, what's the right word for this? We need to help independent media survive in the Global South. That is our focus. This is something we did in the Philippines. This is number 2, community, right? We decided you can't rebuild everything. You can't build tech fast enough. You can't change journalism quickly enough. But what we can do is organize ourselves. And that's what we did in 2021. 150 different groups in the Philippines. And you can see there's 16 newsrooms. You know, trying to get news organizations to collaborate together is like herding cats. Yeah, very difficult, but we did. We did, and it went really well. So the fact checking, but those fact checks don't spread. They don't spread as fast as the lies. And so what we did was we created this mesh layer. Every single member of the 150 groups needed to share one fact check a day, and they share it with emotion, but they cannot use anger. You don't want to be a monster to fight a monster. And what we found was that inspiration spreads as fast as anger. Let me say that one more time. Inspiration spreads as fast as anger. The good spreads as fast as the bad, right? This is the way the ecosystem in the Philippines splintered, and you can see that news, when you follow the news, and many of you here do, because I know you do, I see your faces. Some of you cluster around news organizations. The folks who follow artists cluster around the art world. Activists tend to cluster together. But the part that was so surprising to me and pushed me to do a lot more work with the Vatican at that point was faith. Faith groups were one of 4 major clusters in the Philippines, right? And that kind of makes sense because faith is visceral. It's emotional to a degree, right? And so that's the part of us that's manipulated, our emotions. Our emotions can be really magical. This is why human beings create things that no one could ever have done before, right? But our public information ecosystem is set against us. Let me show you the moment when Filipinos took over, where facts took over the center of the public information ecosystem. This is on Facebook. The blue are our partners. Let me go back. Blue are our partners. Orange are called boundary spanners. And then the yellow, that was the spread. We took over the center of the public information ecosystem. It just had to be organized. So whatever you do in the physical world, do it in the virtual world, right? There's only one person that exists in both. Let me end with the last one, which is technology. I've heard you talk in the last 2 panels about tech. The tech that has been built for us right now is both predatory and extractive. I'm going to say those 2 words again, predatory and extractive. We can demand better. And you know, I just got tired of saying it over and over, so we built it. We talked about deliberative technology, which combines what is good for the public information ecosystem. We looked at the Matrix protocol, and I'll show you why, because the Matrix protocol, countries that care about data privacy put their websites on the Matrix protocol. That's France and Germany. All the government websites on there. Taiwan used the Matrix protocol, and it gets rid of these challenges that are there. Sorry, I'll be a little bit geeky here. This is the Matrix protocol. You can actually go look at Google matrix.org. So it's a foundation that's been there since 2014. It was not built in Silicon Valley. It was built in the UK. It is open source, it's decentralized, and it's end-to-end encrypted. There are now over 150 million addressable users. We built on top of the Matrix protocol. Why? Look at all the groups that are using it. Governments, militaries, intelligence agencies. And yet, what about us poor people? Why do we not have that safety? And so what we did is we took that open source code and just linked it to our logins. If you've tried Mastodon, this is like Mastodon but better. And Mastodon's problem was that you had to type in DNS server. It was too full of friction to get inside. Well, the Matrix protocol is far easier. This is what it looks like, right? So let's assume, and now this is actually one of the things that we're working on. Let's assume this is Rappler. Let's call this ABS-CBN. We were partners together in that, right? Let's call that CNN. So these are my 3 news groups, right? If Glenda follows Rappler and Bill follows ABS, Glenda and Bill can talk to each other without these groups ever exchanging their data, right? How do you protect data? And here's something that European countries are now finally grappling with, and I think we in Asia have to talk about this: digital sovereignty, right? Because that colonialism has moved to our world. Do you really want Silicon Valley determining what is on your feed without any transparency, right? And there's more than that. Your email, right? There's a lot more, but we can talk about this in the Q&A. Please ask questions. And I love being challenged, so please challenge. This is one of the things we just did. We just brought on our community news sites onto the Matrix protocol. And that includes the Philippine Press Institute, which has 63 different community news groups. The Daily Guardian in Iloilo and the Sun Star in Cebu are on the Matrix protocol. Our goal, my dream, is a global federation of news organizations where real people can talk to real people and we are not manipulated. We share a reality. It's working. We used it in the midterm in our our elections. You can get it on Android. You can get it on iOS, on Apple. But I'm gonna end. Go ahead. You can click on that. I like that. Thank you. This is the problem, just so it's easier, because it's a little bit geeky, right? The problem that we have right now is that everything you are on is a walled garden that is controlled by someone else you did not elect. Absolutely no accountability but profit, right? So we need to move from this, which every government should have demanded, to something like this, right? Someone in Singapore, we actually have already begun regional partnerships. But someone asked here, so let's say this, I'll go on this side, so you can. So let's say this is the Philippine News Federation, and this one is a matrix protocol that includes, let's say this is the German military. We can all intersect with each other. And in the matrix, I hate to say the matrix because now I feel like, the movie, The Matrix, blue pill or red pill? In the matrix protocol, you own your data. You have some control over it. That's the dream, because if we don't get that, if we cannot tell the difference between fact and fiction, we lose everything. I'm gonna leave it with this and say thank you and ask for your questions.
Thank you very much, Maria. Please take your seat.
I'm on the hot seat.
So yes, so Maria will be on the hot seat. I have been given the privilege of moderating this session. We will be taking questions from the audience. I have a first question to kick us off while we wait for questions from the audience, okay? So please, there's an extra mic, so if someone from the team can also help us move the extra mic along as I call on the first other folks. My first question is, you talked about how anger, hate, fear spreads faster than facts. And then there was this hopeful bit about how inspiration could possibly be spreading as quickly.
Yeah.
My question is, but isn't anger necessary to political mobilization? In our effort to frame the conversation around, of course, hate is, I guess, a much easier concept to sort of categorize. But when you're talking about anger or dissatisfaction, isn't it a necessary ingredient for activists, for those who want to make their democracies better, for those who are operating in authoritarian regimes to try and make better systems for themselves? What do you how do you respond to a question like that?
I love the question, right? Is anger necessary for activism? And my response is absolutely not. Right? And part of the reason is what I know and what I've lived through. Think about it like this. I've lived through all the revolutions in Southeast Asia, right? One of the most recent ones, recent by our standards, was 1998 in Indonesia, when it was the end of, oh my gosh, Habibi took office at the end of almost 27 years of Suharto. Anger destroys. Anger destroys, right? You can destroy, but if you don't have a vision of what to build, then what are you going to do? I watched this in East Timor where the Falentil guerrillas spent their energy and their time fighting. But then what happens when it's time to govern? I like rational beings. You know, I like when we listen to each other and debate policies. How much debating of policies have you seen around the world? I have seen some of that at the EU. 27 countries literally taking apart. I sat through the UK's online safety bill, right, when it was still there. And part of our challenge in that time period was moving it away from the way big tech had lobbied, which was this is a free speech issue, and moving it to a safety issue. And once parents began to see the impact on their kids, right, let's talk about someone like Megan Garcia, who is a lawyer whose son, at 14 years old, committed suicide. And when she went through his devices, she saw that a chatbot helped him, pushed him to do that. She's a lawyer. Within 6 months, she filed a case in Florida against that. So, yes, there are lots of emotions in being human, but anger should not be our main driving force. Look, I'm still emotional about this because actually the reality was I couldn't let myself get angry during the time of Duterte. I couldn't let myself get emotional until after we began winning the cases. And that's when I realized, oh my God, I have so much pent-up anger. I better deal with this. So anger destroys. Anger is like setting something on fire. But if you're going to be driven by anger, what are you going to be left with?
Okay, so just to make sure that we have as much time for questions, when you ask your question, please introduce yourself.
And your country.
Your country. And then just one question, please, because there's a lot of hands raised. So maybe the gentleman in the glasses.
Thank you. I'm Dongan from Vietnam.
From Vietnam.
From Vietnam,
Hello.
yes. I only have one question, but I have a request too. So one question and one request. Okay.
Good leader. He negotiates.
Yeah. So because my whole family is in journalism, my whole family, we have about 30 people, including my father and my father-in-law and my wife are in the news business in Vietnam, but I'm not. I'm actually, I actually
You had
have
to earn money for them.
No, I have a PhD in journalism, but I teach international communication. I'm not doing journalism.
Fantastic.
That comes a request. I would need a picture with you later to,
You got it.
to send home and say that I'm next to a journalist who win the Nobel Prize. That would be a great picture for the whole family to enjoy this weekend.
Thank you.
Hope that and yes.
Yes.
But the question is, I have in my faculty of international communication in Vietnam, we have about 2,000 students studying both graduates and undergraduates. And because they study international communications, a lot of them graduate becoming a journalist. And often I have these questions that they ask. Journalism is politics.
Interesting, yes.
Yes, but not all of them can do politics. So how can they avoid politics and still doing good quality journalism and be a great journalist?
So a quick answer is not everything in journalism is actually politics. But I'm going to say the opposite of that now. And I only say this because of what we lived through in the Duterte administration. Now I actually think everything is political, right? They're all the choices that determine who gets which resources. How do you hold a government to account? But walking into journalism, right? Journalism is many things in many different cultures. And that's part of the reason at the UN I used information integrity. Because, for example, in the Philippines, entertainment. So I used to run the largest news network, the largest news organization in the Philippines. And one of the things that I saw, and this was the same in the Philippines as it was in America, number one in ratings always was crime. Crime. Number two was entertainment. And I learned a lot being with ABS-CBN. I see, one of the members of the Lopez family. What I learned was part of the reason that crime was number one, because I tried when I was leading the group to take it out of the primetime newscast. But then it was because in a country where institutions are weak, everything works through social networks, and crime was rampant. And families, the heads of families in particular, the men wanted to know how to protect their families. So the story about the Akyat Bahay gang, the robbery gang, was important because they wanted to know who and what the police were doing. On entertainment, I mean, look, we just brought George and Amal Clooney in and talk about an intersection between, kinds of entertainment. What I like to think is that entertainment takes the best of who we are and allows us to dream about different worlds. It can be a lot more. But I guess journalism isn't only about the bad. Sorry, I know I tend to be that way. I'm 40 years a journalist, so but it can also be about the good. And I think that's the challenge to journalists today, especially as we're being pumped full of toxic sludge. When you are on this device, every move you make is monitored, right? Like if you have the health thing, if you take Oro, O-U-R-O, the ring, where does all that data go? We're living at a moment when that is the fundamental thing that governments need to determine. And so, one of the things, for example, that I love about, so here's one where I've been caught between worlds. Singapore. Is Singapore a democracy or not? Depending on which country you're from, you will answer differently, right? But the system works. They have 10-year plans. Who says one system is better than another if it delivers for the people, right? So again, I feel like this is such a time of creative destruction that we can create, but you can't create if you're being manipulated. So anyway, long answer to, I think journalism is shifting and changing, and I really hope we can survive this time period. We're certainly doing all we can, and one of the things that is the most difficult and most dangerous is investigative journalism. And I think you really do need investigative journalism. Otherwise, there's no way for a society to hold power to account. And the best leaders have always welcomed that check, because a president of our country cannot know everything going on around him. It's impossible. We are partners in the same thing. So I'll just end with one last thing, which is oftentimes we forget what governments can do, right? Democratic governments have to step up right now. And I'm going to include Vietnam in that, because South China Sea, West Philippine Sea, whatever we're on the same side on that one. Because this moment, we will need at least 20 to 30 countries to reinvigorate the United Nations. And it doesn't have to be in the United Nations. Again, I go back to Democracia Siempre, which is formed by 10, it was actually Brazil and Chile, then Spain, and now it's 20 countries. So we in Asia, Japan has shifted. I covered Japan during, the Murayama years. There's so much change. I heard from Bangladesh earlier. My friend, Muhammad Yunus is now the leader there, right? Talk about painful change. But I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is that for leaders today, it is virtually impossible to communicate good efforts through this public information ecosystem. This is meant to divide us. And if we as citizens understand that, then we can listen to each other better.
So the lady in the middle. And then maybe just so that I can try to be fair, people can fall in line, and then depending on the time, because I don't want to be accused of favoring any one person wanting to ask questions. So after that, those who want to ask questions, maybe you can stand up and form a line here, behind the lady here, and then we'll ask. If you're asking a question? So yes, so please your name, your country, and then your question. Let's make it as short as possible, please.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Safat, and I'm from the Maldives, and I'm one of the Asia 21 Fellows this year. I found your session very inspirational. Thank you. I wanted to share that I ran for parliament in the Maldives in the last election, and I came in second. And
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Wait, I know you. I can take a photo.
Thank you, thank you. And I wanted to actually share that I also faced a lot of like trolling and
Yes.
character assassination attempts, and of course a lot of these social media attacks. And I wanted to just get your opinion on how to deal with such situations, and I would really love to hear from you. Thank you.
Please tell me your name again.
My name is Safat.
Safa.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh. So first, well, we love the Maldives. So women politicians, women leaders come under more attack than men. In the Philippines in 2017, women leaders were attacked at least 10 times more, right? So we could chart this data. I think what you need to do, and this is what government should be doing, is literally calling attention to this, right? These are not people just randomly being mean, right? These are organized information warfare that is meant for power. In the end, this is power and money, right? So, first, congratulations for sticking your neck out. We need good people in government, right? But you have Asia. You have this group. I think the women should be coming together. There are groups to help. What we've tried to do in the Philippines is to organize online as much as you organize in the physical world. So we do need good people in government. So I hope you win the next time.
The next question, your name, your country, and then your question.
Hello. Hi, I'm Capucine Cognier. I'm also an Asia 21 Next Generation Fellow, and as you can tell by my name, I'm French.
The French, we love you.
That's what I'm coming to. And I started, my very first paid job was in Le Monde, our
Fantastic.
most read newspaper. In France, there is a very mixed relationship with this digital sovereignty that you spoke about. And I'm sure you've had the question before, but I still really want to hear your answer. It's all fine and great to have that, but with that comes a lot of constraints for our tech companies. And so, how do we build tech companies that compete with Meta and ByteDance, etc., if we have those constraints?
Oh my gosh, I love your question. So first of all, I know France really well. Number one, because this IO, the International Fund for Public Interest Media, was initially, some of the funding came from President Macron, and it is based in Paris, right? We literally have an international organization in Paris. I watched Macron go from the candidate when he was running for office, and they demanded that Facebook take down the fake accounts attacking him. Facebook did not do this in the Philippines, but for the 2017 French elections, took down 30,000 to 50,000 fake accounts. That's one. Two, the main part, I was there during the Yellow Vest protest, right, which was fueled by Facebook. And I was also, so many things. So on your question of how do you stop it? You legislate it. Sorry. Now I sound like what's the right word? I believe that governments, democratic governments, have abdicated their responsibility because they've believed the tech lobbies. So in the EU today, The tech lobby, the largest globally now, is 150 million euros a year. In America, 3 years ago, it was 70 million US dollars, right? It is now the largest. It is, again, I'll use those words. It's predatory and, what's the word for mining?
Extractive.
Extractive, thank you. Thank you. Predatory and extractive. So why is this allowed? Why are news organizations liable for lies? And yet tech companies can profile, can steal our data, actually can steal what we in the news group spend a lot of money creating, and then make money out of it, right? So that's the first. I think the legislation to actually protect. And let's not talk about, the easiest part to get legislators to listen is when you talk about kids, right? The next generation. It's what he does because it's the easiest to get bipartisan support in the United States. Jonathan Haidt wrote a book on the anxious generation. But if we don't put these laws in place, there is no way that responsible tech, right? That tech that is not commodifying us, there's no way that will work. I mean, literally, the reason we could build the Matrix protocol is because we began winning our cases. And so I took the money that went to lawyers and moved it to tech. If we still needed that, it would have been impossible. And how many are actually funding responsible tech? Mistral, that's a French company, right? But Mistral will also now be using, so here's the last thing I'll say, because I'm sorry, but we began something called ROOST, Robust Open Online Safety Tools. ROOST, you can check it, right? For 1 year, we incubated it at Columbia University, the Institute of Global Politics. It's led by Camille Francois. We co-lead the Democracy and Technology Initiative at CIPA. So what we did is we convened all of the people, the industry people, the top 20 minds we could find working on trust and safety inside industry. And we came out with 2 papers. If you want to read that, just go to the website at IGP or CIPA at Columbia University. Why am I telling you this? Because when we came out with that paper, we got industry involved, and then we went to them for funding. We raised $31 million, and what we did at the Paris Peace Forum a few months ago was to actually get OpenAI to release one of its top, very expensive trust and safety tool. And our goal there for Roost is to put a floor on safety, right? So that anyone building anything online can use these trust and safety tools for free, because governments are taking too long. So that's part of our goal. So the best way, legislation. After legislation, build. I would say 3 things, and these are for governments. The first, build, 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 right? The second is actually, in addition to building, you need to be transparent to your community. But how are you going to talk to them? Because if you're doing it on Facebook, they're going to attack you, right? Almost off the top. So what is that? And then the third one is, it's transparency and account. Get the citizens involved. Let me just say one last thing, and this is not in France, but in America, Christopher Wiley, the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, said that in 2016, that they created a Facebook page for every voting county in America that targeted young men, right? And then they continued that. This manipulation continues today. So you are a young leader. How do you let people know this is happening? How do you build communities of action?
Okay. So for the rest, because I want to give everyone a chance to ask their question, we'll change it up a bit, Maria.
Okay, sorry, I'll try to be shorter. TV sound bites.
But before you answer, I'll have the 4 of you ask your questions now.
Okay.
Or the 5 of you, if there's one there. Ask all of your questions now. Make it quick, and then we'll have Maria respond to them.
My name is Yusra Askari. I'm a journalist based in Pakistan, in Karachi, and I represented an Indian news network for nearly 10 years or over. Our former Prime Minister Imran Khan is behind bars, but his Twitter account, his X account, is flourishing every day. How in countries based where the kind of literacy levels are fairly low, how has a smartphone and social media changed the face of politics?
Okay.
Oh my
Next
gosh.
question.
Hi, Maria. Thanks for coming to talk to us. My name is Michael. I'm a fellow this year from London, from the United Kingdom. My question is about looking forward to how we can reconcile divergent and opposing voices. I think it's really important that the Matrix Protocol can give people that share your values a voice. But how can we stop things like the Matrix Protocol from being an echo chamber where people who already agree talk to each other?
Correct.
Would it be a good idea
Yeah.
for more right-wing outlets to join the Matrix
Yeah.
Protocol?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Next.
Hi, Maria. My name is Zaid. I'm from Kashmir. I'm also one
Oh,
of the
Kashmir.
Asia 21 fellows this year. I run a newsroom from Kashmir. I'm Kashmir-based. And we earlier were advertisement model-based.
Yeah.
But when they shut down the internet for more than 6 months, we stopped publishing. And when we started, one of my main competitors or my partners, my peers, they shut down. But we kept going. We moved on to a subscription-based model.
Yeah.
But last month, my other peer or competitor also shut down because they were also, there was lack of funding. New advertisers wouldn't work with us because we're independent media.
Yeah.
And subscribers started canceling subscriptions because they feared that they might be seen as supporting.
They will get
Yeah,
targeted.
they will
right?
get targeted
Yeah.
and they want to come back. So the idea of making a community-funded, independent newsroom that is operating from a conflict zone was something that I feel that I failed at. But every 2 years, I feel that I'm starting from scratch. I'm going around in circles. We started with a team of 25, and now we're down to 4 people and a few contributors. So what advice do you have for somebody like me who refuses to give up? I'm trying to keep it going, but there are times where I feel that maybe I'm just going purposelessly. Like, what advice would you give for somebody who's now forced as a media entrepreneur to be operating from a very difficult zone?
From exile,
Okay.
right?
Hello, Maria. My name is Hong. I'm from China. I was an investigative journalist, but not anymore. So my question is that you mentioned a little bit about the information war regarding the South China Sea and also West Philippine Sea. Could you please elaborate more on that? I really would love to hear your perspective. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, my name is Erica from the Philippines. I find it very difficult to navigate dealing with my social circle. So here in the Philippines, it's very polarized. We have red, green, and now pink and yellow.
Yes.
And I want to know concrete steps on how to deal with I have a lot of friends who are Duterte supporters from Mindanao. So they all in
Yes.
droves and they're spreading misinformation. And a lot of my other friends have unfriended these people. They just block them, unfriend them outright.
Yes.
I don't want to unfriend or block them because they will be left to their own devices and they will exist in an echo chamber. But at the same time, I also don't know how to efficiently penetrate that echo chamber, without alienating them too much that they will also unfriend me. Now, they will unfriend me because I'm spreading facts.
Yes.
And so that's a very big problem for me. And these are Athenians. So you would think they're smart. But yeah, so that's very difficult for me. Thank you.
No. It's not about smart,
Okay.
actually. Sorry, go
So,
ahead.
sorry, Maria.
No,
Last
no, go,
question.
go.
So that we will give you the time to post. Yes.
I'm looking for.
Hi, Maria. I'm Ken from the Philippines.
Hello, Ken. Nice to see you again.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about flood control corruption, but I'm not going to ask about that.
Are you still in government?
No, I'm
No.
now in civil society, identifying projects that are overpriced in the 2026 budget.
Ah,
Yeah.
nice.
We are sleepless. We lack sleep. But I wanted to ask about how do you take care of yourself? Because you are in the fire. You are leading the fight in the Armageddon. And how are you taking care of yourself and how are you taking taking care of your newsroom? Because I have so many friends who are Rapplers.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's the easiest one to answer. Look, I feel like this moment is so critical. And from August until November, when I had to come back to Manila for our own Social Good Summit, I was literally hitting a city and a speech a day. Because nothing beats getting people to understand more than when you can see into their eyes. Right? So like, this is something we learned in Rappler, that you can't stay online. You go back to being human. So that was like literally, I mean, one week I remembered I was coming, so I teach every Wednesday in New York. So during the One Young World, I was in Munich Monday, Tuesday. I land Tuesday night. I teach Wednesday. On Thursday, I went to London. On Friday, I was in Paris. So I think this is the moment. Hillary Clinton, who runs, she co-leads the Institute of Global Politics with the Dean of SIPA, started calling me Paula Revere because I had to go to the Concord Museum to actually give a speech at the Concord Museum, right? Because remember what Paul Revere did? He just literally got on a horse and said, the British are coming, and then thousands of Minutemen came in. Who are the Minutemen today around the world, right? They won against the British. Anyway, sorry. So hope comes from action. This moment is so important. I got to sleep on the 18-hour flight from New York to Singapore, so that's cool. We keep going, right? Because I think this is what the moment demands. So that's the question for you. What in your country, what does this moment demand from you? Running for office is a demand, and because you are a woman, there were sacrifices you had to make. So that's the first. Let me answer all the other questions. They were really Southeast Asia, from China. I was going to try to look for slides, and let me see if I can find them. But what we did was we began looking at Chinese disinformation. So one of the things I didn't tell you is, where does disinformation come from? It's actually part of Russian military doctrine, right? And Andrei Europov said this. I always remember this quote, and I could never use it during the time of Duterte. He said, "Desinformatia is like cocaine. You take it once or twice, you're okay. But if you take it all the time, you become an addict, a changed man." We live in a world of addicts today, right? That's why trust is broken down. Because if you don't have facts, you can't have truth, you break down trust. That chaos is meant to break down trust. You have a group here that is built on trust. Everything in our world moves with the speed of trust, right? So that's part of it. So on China and Chinese disinformation, for a very, very long time, Chinese propaganda was much more about, the great leader. It was I think at one point the Wall Street Journal had 450 million social media posts about China in a self-aggrandizing fashion. But then it began in the West Philippine Sea, in the South China Sea, it began following Russian disinformation. And what I can do is either send it to you or let's go on Blue Sky and not X. I'll put it on Blue Sky. I'll put the stories. If you go on Rappler, you can look at Decoded, search Decoded, and you will find the Chinese information operations. That's for Homan from China, Zed from Kashmir. Well, first, I want to say thank you for your dedication. Like, you have a family, so you have to be careful. Right? There's something that we were taught in hostile environment training. If two sides are shooting at each other and a person gets shot in the middle, the first thing you have to do before you go pick up the person who was shot is to think, danger to me, danger to you. You have to constantly assess the danger to you and your family and assess your risk appetite for that, right? I always felt I never believed Filipinos lost our values. I always felt this is a country that was one of the first signatories to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I had faith we would find our way back. So you have to be that clear-headed about looking at the danger to you and your family, right? It was the same thing I had to do for Rappler because we're very young. And at one point, when the first shutdown order happened, I asked my team, we did a general assembly, and I asked our reporters, you know, because the danger levels go up, and I asked them, if you no longer want to work with us, you know, tell us and we'll help find a job for you in another news organization. Because here's the other part. If you are working in a conflict zone, you are only as good as your weakest link. So you have to also assess that. Your question was more monetary, about sustainable, how to be sustainable. And I wouldn't have done anything differently. I would have gone subscription from the overseas Kashmiris, right? And are you on the Indian side or the Pakistani side? You're on the Indian side. How crazy would it be to ask the Indian government for funding? I mean, that's a crazy, or the Pakistani government.
Let's just say that's two more topics on that.
Okay, let's talk about this afterward because I'll be at the dinner and I can see what we can do. Michael, how to reconcile divergent and opposing views, right? So actually you'll see, so there are several experiments that have happened in different parts of the world. When you're in the physical world, opposing views find common ground significantly faster than if you are on social media, right? And so one of the things that in the Institute of Global Politics, we actually have something we call across the aisle to try to get Republicans and Democrats together, and that's run by, well, different groups are running it. But these differences are pounded open online by design because it makes more money for the platforms. Why is this legal, right? So I think these initiatives actually work. Yeah, it's much easier to talk about other countries than in the Philippines, right? I mean, if you guys, let's touch the Philippines just a little bit, right? We had the Trillion People March. Do you remember the Million People March for the Janet Napoles, right? That was one of the first times Rappler was actually recognized. I think the biggest problem in the Trillion People March is going to be to get those activist organizations to find common ground. Because them fighting each other, this is a moment for radical collaboration. Because the window for our values are closing. It's closing. And when we lose it, when infotech meets biotech, we will lose agency if we do not have something that is far more transparent, if these laws are not in place. So radical collaboration, and finally the last one, that was the call I gave, was it only last week, at the Global Investigative Journalism Conference. We need to redefine the order. News organizations, did you notice? Facebook took all of our logos off. We need to come together, radical collaboration. Pakistan is the last one, right? I think how does it affect politics? It is. Name and shame no longer works because in the age of exponential lies, we have a fire hose of falsehoods. That's the way Russian disinformation was once characterized. All of this is affecting not just Pakistan, although Pakistan and India were some of the first two where community conflicts actually, they weren't reported as initiated by the tech, but they were like in Myanmar, they were enabled by the tech, right? So this has made it harder for freedom fighters to actually be safe. And it is getting worse. So one of the things we're trying to do is there's a gradation of the tech harms, right? The first is because democratic countries did not put the right policies in place for social media, What are the tech policies? What are governments doing? The second one is on information integrity, where we stand today. How will journalism survive? But the last one is, how can we have eyes on what governments are doing with the technology for war? Right? That last one is surveillance, what the NSO did, Project Lavender this is what Israel used in Gaza. This is this tech that still must be developed further, now used in warfare. Those are, I think, the challenges that we have in front of us. And I hope you're going to work on them, because we really need, I would say, a year. This is a crucial year. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I forgot your question. Sorry, last. How can I forget the Pinay? No. So first, understand that the smartest people are often the easiest to manipulate online, because it is about emotional manipulation. So even though they went to Ateneo, right? Or, hello, Atenistas, I get the feeling you're. So what's being manipulated is our emotions. And emotions are, this is what artists tap for creating incredibly wonderful things. And all it is being used for right now is destruction. So how do I can't leave social media. People ask how that of me. Why don't you leave? Because I can't, because I'm a journalist. I need to see how it works. I need to see how it manipulates our people. I've not blocked. I see it at the worst of times, the worst of it. The 90 hate messages per hour, they're still there on the public page that I have. I didn't take any of it down, but Facebook did, right? That's the other thing. They wind up taking things down. So I say move into the physical world. Move into the real world. Because your friends will stay your friends. When you look someone in the eyes, we're not battling for Duterte or Marcos or whoever, right? That isn't the world we live in. This is a difficult time globally. Oh, we didn't even talk about tariffs. Yeah. We could talk about that at dinner. But, it's a tough time, and I think this is a time not just for radical collaboration, but for empathy. Empathy. So for businesses also, I ask that. Because oftentimes, here's another question I get. Oftentimes, the right decision for business is the wrong decision for your humanity. Are you coming to that? I get that as a news head. There are things that I can do that will make more money, but are not good things. They're not ethical, right? Someone asked me, why don't you build a bot army? Because it's unethical, right? Because we saw them before anyone else did. So goes back. Someone said, someone said, know your whys. Know why you do what you do. Know your values. Know your North Star. And then build your tribe.
So thank you very much, Maria.